So the operative assumption for people like me who are, watching but not Democrats and maybe not as informed about what the Democratic Party really is as we should be, is that, they have to go with Kamala because she's sort of black, sort of Indian, and a woman for DEI reasons.
It's tough for them to pass her over because of that.
Well, you would think that. I mean, that's my read on it. I mean, she's a moron in a job she doesn't deserve. That's the whole point of DEI, is to elevate people who don't deserve their jobs to positions of power, obviously. And that they have to kind of roll with that because the constituencies within the party will flip out if they don't pick her. I've just assumed that from day one. That's why she's such a problem.
Well,
but now I'm starting to think,
in 2020, she was never the original pick to begin with.
Oh, I'm aware. Yeah.
Right? This is everything you're describing is why she was picked then, because in the George Floyd moment, during the racial reckoning, as a sailor puts it, that, he wanted like Klobuchar, or he was even talking about Gretchen Whitmer back then in 2020. But then George Floyd happens, they go full BLM, and suddenly it's okay. We've got to pick someone that, checks all these boxes.
For sure. And I thought that was, a mistake in that it puts them in a box that it's hard to get out of. But now I'm thinking, because I think we've just watched like the most brutal exercise of raw, undisguised power I've ever seen in this country, that they're not hemmed in by that. Like, they really don't care. They don't care what their own constituencies think. They can just install somebody. And because the Democratic Party is not an ideological movement, it's just a bunch of people clustered together for power.
Leftism is not ideological.
That's exactly right.
It's never been. It's a tactic.
Right. And spiritual, I would say also, but whatever, right. But it's certainly not ideological. It doesn't even matter what the ideas are. But at this point, they can kind of put anyone in. So Trump was getting more support from African Americans than any Republican since Nixon, I think. Maybe even more than Nixon. Does Kamala Harris change that?
There's no question that there will be some people who will vote for her just because of the demographics that she represents physically. But I'm not sure it's going to be as great as they think. When she was running for president, she didn't get a large amount of black support. And I know the media is going to do everything to make her seem like Martin Luther King in a different body, but I think people maybe are not going to be as easy to manipulate as that. And I think Trump will continue to attract a lot of people in the black community because his policies recognize that a rising tide lifts all boats. And, I don't think black people are particularly interested in having an advantage over everybody else. They just want a level playing field, something that works for everybody. And I think that's one of the reasons that Trump is attracting so much attention.
Kamala Harris wouldn't be an obvious kind of leader of African Americans, and she's, grew up in Canada, had a Jamaican immigrant father, an Indian immigrant mother. It's not obvious why she would be the choice of African Americans, I guess.
No, it's the perceptions.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of it will be driven by the media, who will try to make her seem like, she's the second coming of Christ. But I just don't think that that's going to work in this particular case. Not to mention the fact that in the past, at least, she has not been an inspirational individual. And, her speeches have certainly not been the kind that would have people fired up and saying, yes, we will go to the end of the earth for this woman. Yeah. So I hope she has some really good speechwriters.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you can get Kamala Harris elected president, you've kind of proven that the democracy's fake, I think.
Well, Nancy Pelosi once said, I can take this glass of water and I can put a D behind it and get it elected. There's no question there is a machine and there is a mechanism for doing things. So you saw how effective it was in Pennsylvania for Fetterman at a time when, before he recovered from his stroke, he was a basket case.
He couldn't talk.
And yet he was still able to be elected over someone who was very articulate and very logical, Dr. Oz. So no one should underestimate the impact of that machine and what it can do.
He took quite a while to endorse camel toe, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think Joe Biden put the fucks to him on that. I didn't think they. I don't think they wanted her.
When you say, just for people who don't live in the region, when you say put the fucks to him, what does that mean?
He was like giving him the middle finger.
Oh, okay.
Like, yeah. She is not qualified to do anything I wouldn't hire her for a kindergarten art teacher. I wouldn't.
I don't think anyone would.
Yeah, I mean, how did she? That's another thing. I know how she got in because DEI or DIE or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, we got to get rid of those laws.
Which laws?
I don't know if they're laws. Are any of these things laws that these people are doing? Do you even know?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think they're laws. I just think they're spoken assumptions.
I don't think you're getting a job at JP Morgan if that's your question.
Right, but I don't think that these things that people are doing are laws. I don't think they have to hire somebody because they're of color or a woman, or there's no law saying you have to have 39% of your employees have to be of color. There's no law, or is there?
I think the Justice Department will sue you if you don't.
Will they?
Yep. Because too many white men is bad. They might write a constitution or build a functional country. The story of Kamala Harris. I mean, when I was a child, I got my first driver's license in 1985 or so-ish, 1985. Kamala Harris would be working at the DMV. And you'd think, how did someone like this get a job at the DMV? She's dumb.
It's a prestigious job.
She's annoying.
Yeah.
She clearly hates me for reasons I can't control. And then you wake up in a country where she's a U.S. senator, then vice president of the United States. It's no, I completely agree with you. The problem is it's hard to fix that. The generational, I actually grew up in a family like this, G5 or whatever. And you look around and everybody's kind of not impressive and self-hating and not productive and increasingly not rich at all and drinking too much and decadent and filled with all kinds of angst and all that. Generational wealth does not, I've almost never seen it work. So what's the answer to that?
Well, I don't think the answer is sitting on the sidelines and having them keep getting more and more.
But that
power
is you just described the problem of the country.
Right.
I'm not attacking the Crown family or the Goldman Sachs family. So I wonder how screwed up the G5 is, and all those families pretty screwed up.
Of course it is.
Big time.
No question about it.
So what happens in families happens at scale. It happens in countries.
For sure. But also at the same time, when you go and study Lawrence Miller's book, Barbarians to Bureaucrats, he talks about every civilization, every society, every country, company goes through these phases. First, you have the prophet. He's the founder. You have the founding fathers, right? Hey, we're going to go out there and there's no way we're going to pay taxes on taxation without represent. Shit, okay. These guys are now wanting to pay taxes. Yeah, we're not going to, they can't do that to us. All right. Then they inspire barbarians. Okay. So Jobs inspired barbarians. Musk inspires barbarians. Sometimes the prophet is a barbarian. Musk is both, right? Jobs is both. Our founding fathers, many of them were both. So you got prophet, barbarian, builders, explorers, then you have administrators.
Oh, yes.
Then you have aristocrats, bureaucrats. Then comes the downfall. Company, family, legacy, G4, G5, it's done. And the only way at this point that you can save that civilization, that society, that company, is for a synergist that comes in and is able to rally enough of the people to say, here's what we're going to be doing. He's not trying to rally the aristocrats. He's not trying to rally the bureaucrats. You're not going to get those guys. Those guys got to get fired. He's trying to rally the builders, the explorers, the guys that are saying, hey, man, I just want to kind of go out there and build my business. I feel we're at an era right now, we're at a phase right now where the synergists need to say, you know what? I feel like I can play the role for this. Great. Let's roll. I think these guys need to right now either be recruited, they need to be inspired, they need to have people that come to them and have a conversation saying, hey, I think you need to consider, we got 5 of us here. We came here for one reason. We're thinking about talking to you about 2028. Not interested, not this, not saying these conversations are not happening. Of course, they're happening behind closed doors regularly. But I think these guys, if America's worth saving, if the concept of saving America is something that we value, we need to either choose, if we can, contribute kind of like you, or we need to inspire and recruit and, get others to say, I think you ought to consider doing this.
Could Kamala Harris win?
She could win. There's no question about it. And Republicans would make a huge mistake by discounting her. If by discounting her, they're assuming we don't have to work that hard to defeat her. A few things we know about Kamala Harris.
Well, she's technically the head of the body you serve in.
Yes, she's the president of the Senate. Kamala Harris, despite her gaffes that we've seen, when she's operating on script and when she's got good staff preparing her material and she sticks to that material, she's actually pretty good. Now, I disagree with almost everything she says.
Of course.
But when she stays on script, she can be a compelling speaker, far more compelling than President Biden. Biden of yesteryear did a better job than he's done in the last few years, but she's a much more compelling speaker than others, and I think she's going to be very carefully scripted over the next few months. So yeah, I think we should be very worried about it. We've already seen the media-sponsored apotheosis of Kamala Harris. I always think about this, the great mural, I guess it's a fresco technically, at the top of the Capitol Rotunda, the inside of the dome. You've got this beautiful painting by Constantino Brumidi, an Italian-born American immigrant. And it's called The Apotheosis of George Washington. It shows George Washington ascending into heaven following his death. And he's surrounded by these 13 angels, each representing one of the original colonies. And he's surrounded, and then there are two other angels right next to him, one of which represents liberty and the other one represents the majesty of government or something like that. And he's being glorified and almost deified. There is a very familiar ring, connection between that painting and what the media is trying to portray of Kamala Harris. In the last few days, you've seen the complete erasure of any reference to Kamala Harris being the border czar, which didn't go well. There's been an effort, a sustained and fairly successful effort by the media to erase the fact that she was widely regarded as one of the most, if not the very most, progressive liberal member of the United States Senate. There's been this rebirth of Kamala Harris as this great warrior who is ready, willing, and able at a moment's notice to take the reins as America's chief executive. And they're scrubbing things she has said in the past, crazy statements she's made, from defunding the police to aggressive, radical climate change policies, Green New Deal stuff. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. They're papering over all of that. So yes, Kamala Harris is a threat because she's got this media industrial complex that's completely behind her.
Wouldn't you want Kamala Harris to have some power of the bully pulpit, power of some kind of record to her name? Because whatever record she has, the only things that she was associated with in the administration, other than this wild series of interviews, are the border. And there was that country in Europe, and they were having some issues in 2020. Ukraine, right? They gave her Ukraine and said that Chica's the one who flies to the Munich conference in February of 2022 and says, there is no question on my mind that Ukraine will definitely be in NATO. And
she caused the war in Ukraine.
Right. So Putin invades the next day.
Of course.
Right. And they give that to her because there's been a shade war going on between Biden and Kamala from day one of this administration. It's very clear. We've been reporting out at Human Events. I think everyone sees it now. Conspiracy theory, right? But it's so obvious they hate each other. So they were giving her these obviously will fail assignments and say, great, pin it on her. But the problem is that's all backfired now, because now if they want her to be the one who's got any credibility, who's going to be signing off on things, they know she's a complete nut job. And so you put something like that in office, and she's going to be signing off on the proxy war with Russia. She's going to be signing off on the proxy war with Iran, perhaps the direct war with China. Who knows what comes next? This is someone who's totally unstable. So what it tells me is that they don't quite have all their hooks in. But one of the things that I'm hearing, Tucker, is that there are people in the Democrat donor base who are thinking like what I'm saying right now, that it doesn't make any sense for us to say she should be president when she could be president right now. That if she's this wonderful, amazing
Why wouldn't she run as
president,
an incumbent? I've thought that since July 1st when I talked to a very knowledgeable Democrat. Of course, take Biden out, make her president. She's running from the Oval Office. Like, why wouldn't you want that?
The only thing I could think of is this perhaps was part of the deal they made with the Bidens. We'll let you run out the clock.
Yeah, but I mean, these are people who are, willing to do anything, say anything.
I don't think that deal's going to last.
What do you think would happen if Kamala Harris got elected president?
I think we would continue to move in a very leftist direction. I mean, she was the most radical left-wing member of the Senate. She was even to the left of Bernie Sanders. She was a co-sponsor of the Green New Energy deal. She wants Medicaid for everybody, mandatory, no private insurance. As the DA, she was the one who basically didn't want to punish people who were guilty of horrendous crimes and repeat offenders. And she wanted open borders. And all the things that we see happening, you can put those on steroids if she becomes the president. And I hope people will go back and look at her record. Don't just listen to pleasant words that will be interspersed with ridiculous laughter, but go back and actually look at what she did and what she has said. And I think people will remember why she got no traction at all when she was running for president.
I'm really struck by that. I'm struck by how little popular support she's ever had, ever. So now, according to some polls, she's the sitting vice president, but she's the front runner in this race. How did that happen in a country that's supposed to be run by its people? That's a representative democracy.
Well, I mean, you talk about a threat to democracy when the votes of 14 million people are just tossed into the wastebasket and a bunch of backroom politicians make decisions.
You're talking about the primary votes.
Right. Then we end up with somebody who, on their own merits, would never have been in that position. That's a real problem. And there are consequences for doing things like that. The reason that our country accelerated from a bunch of ragtag militiamen to the pinnacle of the world is because we had a process and it worked well and it reflected the will of the people. When you throw that out, you can't anticipate that things will continue to go smoothly. They won't. And, we've just thrown a big kink in the whole thing. And hopefully the American people will correct it. I think our founders were very, very smart people. And they studied every single governmental system that had ever existed in the history of the world. And they were eclectics. They extracted the good things and they excluded the bad things. But one of the things that they noticed when they studied all of these governments is that all governments move in the same direction. Regardless of how they start, regardless of how lofty their ideals are, they grow, they infiltrate, and they dominate. And they wanted to give us a government that wouldn't do that, that would leave the people free and in charge. And that's why they work so hard. And as you know, it was very raucous, and there were a lot of different opinions about how to do that. And in the last convention in Philadelphia, Constitutional Convention, the whole thing was about to dissolve. Everybody go their separate ways. And elder statesman Benjamin Franklin, 81 years old, said, "Stop. gentlemen, let's get down on our knees and let's ask God for wisdom. And they prayed and they got up and they resolved their differences and gave us the Constitution, which I believe is a God-inspired document. But if we neglect it, if we don't adhere to it, then we will suffer the consequences. And that's what the battle is right now. The battle that's going on in this election is not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about people who want a country that is of, for, and by the people, and people who want a government that is of, for, and by the government. That's what this is about.
How much, since she is the president of the Senate and you've been a senator for 13 and a half years, how much contact, well, of course, you served in the Senate with her.
Yes.
What's she like?
She's a lot like how she seems on TV. She's got a funny, playful side to her. When she is on script, she can be very emotionally compelling in her speech, but she is very, very liberal. And especially when she went off script in the Senate Judiciary Committee, you could tell that. You could tell. And oftentimes,
so you served on the committee with her?
Oh, yeah. Served on the committee with her. We worked together in the Senate for 4 years. So she was elected in 2016, and she remained in the Senate until she became vice president. So,
so what was she like in committee?
She was feisty, definitely one of the most far left members of the committee. She did not hesitate to take what I thought were very aggressive attacks against Trump era. Remember the entire time that she and I were in the Senate at the same time, the entire time she was in the Senate corresponded precisely with Donald Trump's time as president. She was one who never hesitated to take really aggressive and sometimes cheap pot shots at President Trump's judicial nominees and to at times badly mischaracterize them, Donald Trump, his positions, and his personnel.
Did you get a sense that she regarded the Constitution as sacred or even important?
Well, she's certainly one who would pay lip service to the Constitution. To channel the inner Isaiah, to draw near to the Constitution with her lips, while her heart may have been far from it, because she didn't seem to acknowledge key core limitations on the Constitution. I never saw from her an acceptance or an understanding of the twin structural protections of the Constitution, the vertical protection that we call federalism, leaving most of the power at the states and localities, or the horizontal protection that we call separation of powers. Never saw that from her. And I saw a hyper-obsessiveness on focusing on certain rights that were invented out of whole cloth by the Supreme Court.
She's an abortion fanatic.
Yes.
And I think even if you think of yourself as pro-choice, which I definitely don't, but a lot of good people do think of themselves as pro-choice, it's hard to understand the fanaticism, the sort of crazed, wild-eyed enthusiasm for abortion from her. What do you think that is?
Yeah, well, part of this, I suspect she may be a product of her training, her education, her upbringing, and her political coming of age. American law schools, with very few exceptions, tend to indoctrinate for whatever reason, Roe versus Wade into things. It's like more fundamental than Magna Carta to many of them.
It's more fundamental than the Bill of Rights. I mean, these are the people who don't think you have the right to say what you think, travel where you want to travel, associate with who you want to associate with. The core human rights bestowed by God, they do not acknowledge. Defend yourself. But you do have a right to kill your child? Like, what is that?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I've never seen anything like it. And whenever you have a chance with a progressive colleague, if you ask them, what exactly is it in the Constitution that does that? Then they have to go through.
But why are they so obsessed with it? It's like, look, if you make the case that 13-year-old girl raped, wants to have an abortion, even people opposed to abortion, like I kind of get why you feel that way,
Right.
But the idea that abortion makes you happy, that it's the only in a country that we're not at replacement birth rate. So like the one thing we need to do is like have more abortions. Like where the hell does that come from?
Yeah, it's weird. It's become Instead of being safe, legal, and rare, as the sort of the Clinton era Democratic Party sold it, abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. It's now a sacrament, and you've got people being encouraged now to share their stories. Women who have had abortions being encouraged to share their stories of why it was such a good thing that they had one, which seems really awful.
So awful. It seems to me just like your conventional human sacrifice cult that every civilization has had.
Moloch.
Well, it does seem that. I mean, it does. I never thought that because I grew up in a world where people made arguments in favor of abortion or opposed to abortion on the basis of science or their understanding of it, or on the basis of extenuating circumstances like rape, minors being pregnant. Okay, I get it. But I never imagined a world where the Treasury Secretary would be like, the one thing you can do to help America and its economy is have more abortions, as Janet Yellen said. Like, that's just religion.
Yes, it is. And they're asked to accept it as if a religious article of faith.
To me, the most interesting thing that I see is when you watch all these delegates, all these delegations are coming out now. North Carolina has decided they're behind Kamala Harris, and New York says they're behind Kamala Harris, and each delegation starts going. This is like watching the election results in North Korea. Because what do you mean the delegates are suddenly for Kamala Harris? The delegates were voted for by the people of the Democrat Party. Like 14 million people or something voted in this election, and suddenly their votes don't matter anymore. And the oligarchs have just decided.
It does seem like we're at a point where all of a sudden it happened fast. We're beyond words and rhetoric, beyond politics, beyond process even. And we're dealing with people who are absolutely willing to kill other people for power. Like, that's real.
Of course.
And to stage a coup against an elected president who supposedly got 15 million more votes than any president in history.
Where are all the Biden voters?
But it's like nobody even cares about all that stuff. None of that was ever real. Now they're admitting it's not real, and it's just the people with the guns are in charge. It does feel that way.
It's 100% true. And this is, look, we have the book about it. And when you have an oligarchy that is pushed up against the wall, which by the way they are right now. And it's a dangerous point, but also they would not be doing this if they didn't have to. If they didn't have to go up against Trump, if the assassin's bullet had been 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch to the right, and things had gone a little bit differently in that field in Butler, Pennsylvania, then they wouldn't be having to make these moves, right? Because then it would be, oh my gosh, this horrible thing, but we're gonna trudge on. The election must go on. America must be safe. Joe Biden is the guy, the stable candidate. And you'd be hearing the exact opposite from all of them. They'd be talking about how great Biden is presiding over the funeral of Donald Trump, and maybe give him a state funeral or something like that to sort of, appease the right, but of course never actually give any
But I
power.
wonder if we'll remember what we're learning right now, which is that everything that Joe Scarborough and Wolf Blitzer and Margaret Brennan or, all these people, it's all lies. They'll say anything they need to say. The Democratic Party is not democratic in any sense. Its voters are purely puppets, so are its politicians. It's all fake. And that maybe we should just never forget that and say it out loud. Like, none of this means anything. You're yapping about democracy, of rule of law and order. Like, it's all fake. You're totalitarians. You'll kill people who get in your way. You can never have power. And the rest of us should be prepared to make actual sacrifices to prevent you from getting power, because we're going to become a totalitarian state if you do. I mean, those seem like the obvious lessons to me. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.